that's enough from me. Mark, the show is yours. Thank you, mate.
What I sort of describe is, when you're in flow of thought or when you're in flow of sport, you can also be very much in flow of cooking. Being in flow with food, it's the most electric thing for me because you're not thinking at all. You're going through a process, you're holding conversation, the ingredients are familiar, and it's just practice, practice, practice. So the area that we operate in is called the Downtown East Side. It is the largest open-air drug market in North America. It's one of the densest populations of mental illness, but it's also one of my favorite communities in the world because it's honest. I started working in it before I started working with it. Opening restaurants and falling in love with the neighborhood and its character and its age, I was infected with this feeling of we need to do better. Any great idea before it becomes the norm is crazy. And those levels of pain and passion that you go through to get that to be the norm is something that me and my team are completely up for. The token program is a closed currency that allows you to give somebody a sandwich instead of money that you may be worried they'd spend on drugs or alcohol. We thought we'd do 2 or 3 a day. We've done almost 90,000 in 3 years. When you create something beautiful, it has its own life. The token has its own life. And we're now taking it to major city hubs like San Francisco and New York, and then smaller hubs with native populations in Colombia. How can we make systems that are global systems that translate to every city in the world that will actually help economies as well as the people who are in them? That universal energy just flows straight through all of us. Once we can tap into it to co-create with an audience, that's what happens when I come to a stage. And I'm very specific about people understanding the message in a language they understand, and the universal language is love.
I'm still mad at the barber that did that haircut. I'm like, yo, that was so high and tight. Good morning, everybody. How you guys doing? Good. I'm not going to stand on that stage because it makes me feel weird. I'm going to walk around so I can make you feel weird instead. Amy Christensen is one of the greatest humans alive. I think we can all agree on that. Plug for Amy. If you were paying attention to the video, not just enjoying the incredible visuals, you could hear me saying what Amy says every single day, and that's creating communities of inclusion and creating communities that really are a microcosm to then expand globally and scale. How can we show that success in a community can be scaled globally and have the type of impact we need to change rapidly? So if you think about a little bit of Daniel, a little bit of Amy, a touch of Shane, a little bit of Eamon, that's kind of what I like to live my life like. And I'm very blessed to be able to be around them. So I was told this is the title of the conference, which is also the title of my life. So that was really serendipitous. I appreciate you. And the first part of that was courage. And there's a lot of ways that this lands in the body when you say this word. And depending on your age, it could go back to wartime. It could go to taking a political stance. It could go to a lot of places. Go to childbirth. It goes to a lot of places. But for me, it goes to having the courage to stand for others. So there's a lot of people who do not have the same agency that we have, whether that be a farmer that is not technically savvy, whether that be somebody who's formerly street entrenched like myself, bless you. That's courage. Courage is to stand up against the norm and say things that are controversial until they become the norm themselves, and we see that constantly. This is a gentleman that I ran into when I was doing a talk in a place called Kelowna in British Columbia. I was having a particularly bad day. And again, to give that scope, my bad day versus his bad day, two totally different things. And as I was walking by him, I often stop to engage folks who are street entrenched and just have a word and see what their situation's like in the place that they're in. And this guy, I saw this sign on the back of his cart. He's from Montreal. He'd been living in the street for, I believe it was 16 years. And that was a sign that he had. So I was telling him about my bad day. And he's like, yeah, that sounds terrible. I was like, do you want something to eat? Do you want to get something to eat? He's like, no, I've already eaten. I'm good. I was like, cool. Do you mind if I take a picture of this and this sign? Because this is really like the universe shows up in really funny ways. And this is a check on me to check my own bullshit. And it says it doesn't get easier, you just get stronger. So when you're exhibiting courage, it's not supposed to be easy. It's never been easy. When you stand for others and you stand in a group of people, misogyny is a popular one right now. When you're standing for something, for somebody else, it's uncomfortable, and then it gets easier, and then everybody's life gets better. So we're going to talk a lot about data today. I want to start. Is anybody familiar with Singularity University? Show of hands. Okay, so I got asked to speak at the Singularity University Global Summit. For those of you who don't know, they're considered the foremost futurists in the world. So they're able to predict the future. The gentleman, Ray Kurzweil, who's a co-founder, has done that more successfully than anybody on the planet in the last 30 years. Super impressive guy. I don't know anything about them when I get asked to do this talk. And when I arrived there, I realized it's about a $15,000 ticket. It's very expensive. I don't get to go to that many expensive places, so I'm going to milk it for all it's worth. This is my seat right here, next to this lady. That's the gentleman who's opening the conference. His name is Peter Diamandis. Peter Diamandis is another big thinker. I've never met him before. He gets up, and he starts his presentation like this. The slide says, he walks it on stage, essentially, and he goes, we're living in a time of abundance, and I'm right there. We're in the Mission and the Tenderloin District in San Francisco, where I've just been working for a year. Has anybody ever been there? Show of hands. You know what I'm talking about. Looks like my neighborhood, right? We're living in a time of abundance. I stepped over a human being to get into the conference. It's a tough pill to swallow, considering how the day was set up. And he says, in 1820, 94% of the planet was living in extreme poverty. But, and he fast forwards, and this is the slide, in 2015, congratulations to us as a human population, only 10% lives in extreme poverty. And I'm sitting here still, and it bubbles right up, and I go, bullshit. Loudly. Not intending, it just came out. I had no control of my body or my words. He looks down at me, continues his presentation. The people next to me give me a disparaging look because we're in the Church of Diamandis. I'm not a crowd favorite. The next speaker gets up. He's the president of Singularity University, Rob, awesome guy. His fourth slide is a picture of a man laying on a mattress, and he says, we need not to get caught up in these moments. We need to focus on the greater good. I'm about to lose my mind. So I get up and storm out. Think I make a big diva move. Nobody sees me go. Get to my hotel room, call one of my mentors, a mutual friend of Eamon and mine. I'm like, what am I doing here? This is ridiculous. These people don't know what's going on. I thought I was going to learn stuff. And my mentor's laughing the whole time, like, this is not funny, and I need support, not humor. And he says, you know exactly why you're there. Go talk to those people. So during Mr. Diamandis' presentation, he says, you can download my slides if you sign up for my newsletter, which I quickly do. Download his slides, and I start my presentation as the opening keynote the next day with his slide and say, I'm confused. In 1820, 1.1 billion estimated population. Of course, estimated. I don't know that we were doing any censuses then. In 2017, 1.3 billion people live in extreme poverty. I don't think that's a reduction in poverty. I don't think that's abundance. 3 billion live on less than $2.50 US. Abundance says it's an ample quality. Abundance means everybody. If half the planet is living way below a poverty line and can't feed themselves or nourish themselves, we are not experiencing abundance. It is not where we are. That's my data. But I work in the street. Peter works in a different place. His data is real. So's mine. We can hold multiple truths, but we have to be very mindful of what it is that we're working on. And be very careful that we're not ostracizing others. I heard a really cool example, and it was, if we all get to go to Mars, or have to go to Mars the way we're going, if we all get to go to Mars, are we going to leave everybody behind that can't afford it? Would we feel good when we got there? We would not. So who inspires me and who inspires you. So this is more of a prompt for you. And that prompt is, I want you just to think of the first person that comes to your mind and hold it for a second. And the chances are that's not Muhammad Ali or Mother Teresa or Mahatma Gandhi, although they're wonderful, inspiring people. It might be somebody that you wake up thinking about. It might be somebody that you think about in really tough times. It might be somebody that you refer to when you're thinking about what your next move is. Grandparents, sons, daughters, brothers, sisters. Generally, it's family. I have another family that I work with. This is my oldest employee. His name is Randy. Randy works at the business that you saw, Save On Meats. Save On Meats was a 1957 food security institution before it knew what food security was that I took over a bunch of years ago. Randy has a developmental disability and is also a former addict. He lived in his car with his best friend Brad for almost 10 years. And his best friend Brad got a job first at Save On Meats with me. And about 2 weeks in, he said, I want to introduce you to my friend Randy. He needs a job. He brought Randy in. And Randy has a disposition of me after about 9 bee stings. He is ornery, he's foul-mouthed, and probably one of the hardest working guys I've ever met in my life. He was unemployable by the term and by the definition. He is now what I would say the cornerstone of a kitchen that feeds almost 2,000 people a day now who can't feed themselves. We look in different places. There's not a mold that fits particular employment, and when we take risks and we have the courage to employ those that others wouldn't, the reward is 10x. So the second part, I'm told, of the conference, or the second part of the theme, was opportunity, and the opportunity to do the right thing. I think often how we approach things now is, on the weekends I volunteer, is something I often hear. And that's awesome, to give up the time that you have, potentially with your family, et cetera, to do work. But the opportunity to do the right thing presents itself like in a situation with Randy. Is there somebody more capable, more agreeable? More capable? No. More agreeable? Definitely. But the opportunity to create an archetype or a mold and prove that data, prove the model of hiring people with barriers even further as a for-profit business, not as a charitable institution. Because when people look at charitable institutions that do upward mobility hiring, they go, of course you do. It's a given, which is sad. But when they look at for-profit businesses and go, oh, you do this? Why? And then I get the chance to tell them, inclusion equals profit. And then everybody gets really uncomfortable. Like, oh shit, no. Charity's over here, business is over here, we're starting to get comfortable with social impact, but what are you talking about? Another gentleman who gives me a lot of hope is around this inclusion piece. This is Steve. Steve is seventh generation Coast Salish indigenous man from the downtown east side of Vancouver who stood outside my business for almost a year and asked for a job. We had a sandwich window at the front. He gave himself the title of security guard. We fed him meals. He cracked really racist jokes. And eventually, I walked into the business after one sojourn, and he had a white chef's coat on. He was working in the butcher shop. I was like, who gave you a job? He was like, persistence pays. I was like, it really, really, really does. Steve has been now with us for 6 years. He consults on a lot of the work that we do with Indigenous youth and Indigenous women, specifically to make sure that we're getting it right. Steve lived under a bridge for 13 years prior to that. He's in stabilized housing, et cetera. We're not doing Steve a favor. Steve is constantly doing us a favor. It's the other way around. It's the reframe of the situation. We're practicing having empathy around somebody's situations and their difference, not apathy. Apathy's a dirty word in my world. So over 50% of our employees have significant barriers to employment. That's real, recidivism. Got the jail stamp, can't get a job. Developmental disability, physical disability. All sorts of other things that then make them other than. There is a real strength and diversity in that, and I'll kick a really quick stat for you because it makes me so happy. So I run 5 different operations. We have about 200 employees, so about 100 of those face barriers. Most of them are for-profit businesses. I run one charity. They're all B corporations. Everybody in this room is familiar with that. We were the first B Corp restaurant in Canada. We're the first B Corp brewery. We care very deeply about the growth of that as an acceptable check mark in how to do business. The diversity of our business isn't because it got popular. It's because it works. It's because it's the right thing to do to have a successful business, period. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I'm going to preach anyway if that's okay. They're the longest standing and most dependable employees in my entire company. So what we have in North America is a service turnover rate of over 80% per annum. Everybody's either an actor or trying to be one who works on the floor. Everybody has their ideas and sights set on something else. For me as an employer, that's a nightmare. While I encourage people to have upward mobility and do really cool stuff, I also like to have a stabilized employment force of some sort. My employees who are barriered turn over at less than 3% now. They're rock solid. Sick days, forget about it. The other unintended consequence, which has been amazing, is the morality of the rest of my staff and the retention for them because of who they work with and work for to a common goal has dropped the rest of it to under 20%. Again, that's 60 points less than the national average of turnover. It costs about $2,000 to train a service employee, as anybody who's run a business will know. Doesn't show up in the P&L, breakage, spillage, management hours, etc. So we want to look at all of the different pieces, because how can you do business this way and make sure that it's sustainable? The cost of waste is something that we talk about all the time. As a chef, every single piece of food that we bring into the building needs to be used. There's nothing more heartbreaking than walking over to a garbage can and seeing it half full of produce that's half off when we're trying to feed people every single day and keep those costs down. So systematically, we started to work on that. And together, paired with this thought, which is we have a responsibility to feed those who need help real, nutritious food. Now, living in this neighborhood for almost 11 years now, the food that goes out of soup kitchens and the food that goes out of these lineups that people spend their entire days waiting for, unfortunately, is the best that folks can do a lot of the time. It's coming out of cans. It's coming out of boxes. And it's disgusting. And it's poison. And ultimately, we know how we feel when we eat it. How can we expect somebody that's already facing all of the rest of the issues to do better when the best that we give them is garbage? So we decided that that wasn't going to be the case when we started our meal program 6 years ago. And as you can imagine, that statement, not super popular. I'm okay with that. Because we also offered a helping hand to anybody who wanted it. You want me to show you how to make meals for less than $2? I'm right here. I will come to your kitchen and work with you. The offer stands forever. So what we looked at was how can we support local farmers, of course. Vancouver's an interesting place to do this. But also, what are we doing with our animals that's going to make a lot of sense? Is that my timer or is that your timer? That's your timer. It's your watch. Do you want me to stop? Got it. Okay. I still got 10 minutes. I appreciate you. That's the intensive note-taking of what I'm saying. I love you. Okay, so we work with Cache Creek Beef. Grass-fed, grass-finished. We love these guys. It's so expensive to buy their meat. It's crazy expensive. They got like 35 cattle. How are we going to do this thing? And then we start to think about, well, we could change the way our butcher shop operates and start selling cuts that nobody else sells. Picanhas, bavettes, things I, as a chef, knew about, kind of, but nobody was trying to buy. So we put it into play, and then we have a diner attached to the butcher shop, which we then take the beef and grind out after 3 days. That beef goes into our burgers, best hamburger in the city, come to Vancouver, shameless plug. And then after that, it goes into our meal program, which is delicious and robust. It's not like used-looking cat food in a styrofoam cup. This is what we serve people. And we refuse to do it any other way but family style. So we deliver meals, they sit together, eat together, and know that we love them, and that's why we make this food. Not, this is the best we could do with what we have. But I would be an asshole if it then went into a diesel truck. So we worked with another social impact business called Shift and helped incubate them, gave them the first LOI in business, and they're electrical trikes that also employ people with barriers to deliver the food. So the whole system gets complete. If you miss a step or miss a couple of steps, you've kind of negated the rest of the work. And so it's important to look at all of it from our thing. This happened 3 weeks ago while I was away. This is the amount of meals that have left that little business that you saw in the video in the last 4.5 years. So when people say little businesses can't do enough, we need big business involved. Bullshit. This was done by people who were formerly street entrenched, formerly imprisoned, who were told they weren't good enough in an area that's insane. They did this, and it makes me incredibly proud to look at it. So what's a vision? It's cool to have done 2 million meals, and that number will keep rotating every talk I do, and the next 10 years disappear, and next thing you know, I'm at 5 million, pat myself on the back, doing the greatest hits. Bullshit. That's not helpful to anybody. The vision is to positively impact everyone. So the pride that I feel looking at that number is the pride that I want everybody who does impact to feel. Because it just gets you doing more, constantly. You're consistently chasing that instead of the other thing. And let's call the other thing money for the sake of an argument. If the other thing is money, it starts to come when you're doing the good stuff. It just happens. They're intrinsic. I don't want to get too woo-woo, y'all. It's early. But the universe shows the fuck up when you do good stuff. It just does. In our most dire moments, I thought we were at the point of bankruptcy multiple times. And the universe shows up. So, the vision is also our single biggest challenge socially right now is poverty. And I'm not speaking about homelessness. Homelessness is a symptom. I have to get deemed the homeless guy. As a formerly homeless guy, obviously that bothers me. Our single biggest challenge is poverty. 7 out of 10 Americans are one paycheck away from destitute. That's a hard fact. We think it's more like 8. You see these articles coming more and more. There's one in the Times yesterday. It's getting worse. Homelessness is your problem. If we're going to talk about one of the parts of poverty, it costs a minimum of twice as much to have somebody homeless than it does to house them. A minimum. The studies in San Francisco were 7 times. Emergency services, all of the different things that we set up to keep people homeless. We can build homes, provide services, provide opportunities for less tax dollars. The problem is at least twice as expensive as the solution. That is the definition of insanity to me. It's insane. So if we know this, we have the actual data, we need more data. Because when I bring this stuff to people, they're like, that's cool, show me more. So I spent a year at Stanford, 2016, 2017 as a D-School fellow in innovation, doing exactly that. I did over 100 ethnographic interviews in the street with people who were homeless in San Francisco. In my neighborhood, everybody recognized me. In San Francisco, nobody knows me at all. A couple spaghetti stains on my t-shirt, I fit right in. So I followed this guy who's an actual hero. His name's Kairi Super. He was the guy who invented, I think you can say he invented it, under the bridge outreach to the most mentally ill. He works on the peninsula, or worked, he retired this year. And he showed me 24 case studies from street. I went to the courthouse with him. I went everywhere. I was his shadow. And what works with people who are street entrenched and facing poverty is the same thing that works with us when we're depressed and locked in our homes and we're not telling anybody, is human interaction and care and love. And that's all it takes. That's the solution. It's not the end of the talk, I'm joking. But it is. So how do we connect more people? Well, we need to connect the data. We need to connect the points. We need to connect the resources. The resources exist. But I could stand up here and tell you what I'm going to do. You're like, cool, that guy was great. And you forget next day. What you're going to do, what we're going to do, people support what they co-create. If you're involved in a solution, you see it to the end, you support it. And people trust real results and real data. That's what it comes down to. We see stuff like Haiti happen, and there's billions of dollars, and nobody knows where it goes. You think that doesn't impact the generation underneath us? They don't trust. So amongst the 100 interviews I did with people who were facing street entrenchment, I did another 75 streeters, where I just stopped people who identified as millennials. That part was interesting. The data afterwards was really interesting because I said, how do you feel about charity? And the overwhelming result was, no, I don't trust it. I do my own stuff. I cook meals on the weekend with my mom and I hand them out. I do this. I volunteer. I'm a basketball coach for kids at the Community Y. So how do we get people connected? So for 3.5 years, I've been working on this project called PAL, or Positive Access Link. People are like, digital creates isolation. Yeah, true. If used inappropriately. You spend 5 hours on Facebook, it's a bad idea. Use Messenger to keep in contact with your alumni, it's a great idea. Technology is not the devil the way that it's being positioned with us is. So how do we use it to connect more people to do the good work? So these were the main mandates that I had. Instead of looking at things negatively, I was like, let's reframe this stuff into positivity. We want optimism, we want reality, we want transparency, solutions, connectivity, opportunity, not jargon, but actually attached to the solutions that work. But I had one major problem. So I was helping this guy here figure out the inception of his business in New York. One day, I was on my way to Rome to cook a dinner. I stop in, we're hanging out, we whiteboard all these solutions, and he's like, how can I help you? If you got any problems? I'm like, man, I'm on top of the world right now. I'm on my way to Rome to cook, like things are great, I'm good. He's like, what do you need? And I was like, all right, if I had one pain point right now, it's data. I've done all of this research, and let's use homeless youth. There's 2 counts that are considered real in America for homeless youth. One of them says 54,837. The other says 1.7 million. The homeless count itself says 558,000 in its entirety. It's all bullshit. So how do we get the real data? How we actually do it right now is point-in-time counts. We go out in the street one night of the year in each place, and we tick. We don't even talk to people. We just look at like, that guy in a hoodie, homeless. I wear hoodies. I still take that as offensive. So Eamon starts to laugh. He's like, I got one client right now. I was like, cool, what do they do? And he's like, data. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. Really? He's like, yeah, and they do this. So what I had just drawn on his whiteboard, he showed me the platform. They do exactly what I was trying to do because the universe shows up. So I went to do a talk where I first met Amy in Utah at a place called, in Utah, it's Salt Lake City, at an event called Silicon Slopes. And I talked to the group at Domo, and I was like, if I could do anything, what I'd love to do is talk about how that data is wrong, but I'd need to collate all of it and show it. And they were pretty nonchalant on the phone about it. They're like, oh, yeah, cool. I was like, I know it's an enormous task. They're like, yeah. So 2 days later, I sat down, and they'd show me this dashboard because technology is just doing this. So they aggregated all of the point-in-time counts, and they showed it to me 48 hours later. And my head exploded. I was like, this is so powerful. If I can walk into a place and show them that this data is wrong, imagine what's going to happen. Imagine the minds we could change. But the point of PAL is that every individual who is experiencing homelessness already has a smartphone. Most of you, that doesn't sound crazy because it just is. What if they could share their data? What if they could tell us what was wrong? What if we could build in Yelp for the marginalized? This data changes immediately. These sets, while we have them, this is the best data in North America on this. And Domo's worked for the last 4 months on this with me. We know it's all wrong. But the fact is, then we know we have to prove it. So the opportunity is huge. I want to segue into the next part. To have these conversations to understand that the data is wrong, we're going to take a dinner series that I do where I bring fine dining chefs into my diner in the hood, and we cook a fine dining menu that's a diner menu. It's called the Greasy Spoon. I started it 43 months ago. It's been a runaway success. And Eamon, seeing the success of the one that we just did in Toronto, which I'm going to show you, all of them have been in Vancouver, was like, we have to do this across the country and have this conversation with everybody and all the people who are involved and all the people who care. Let's bring them all in, and then let's do this stuff across, like literally brick and mortars and influence the entire thing with the real data. So this is something that I believe really, really heavily. And as you guys ate last night and hung out with Daniel, this should resonate to you. Food is our last best opportunity to stay connected, to gather with our people and build communities, to hold on to our humanity and to be. When we share food with each other and we look each other in the face and we talk about our problems, almost everything goes away that was an issue for us. Relationships are formed, bonds are created, partnerships are founded. We got to eat together more. This is an awesome screen cap. It's not at all. My editor's completely fired. This is the dinner that we do, if you want to bear with me and have a watch.
All right, we are in Toronto for Greasy Spoon number 40 with Chef Charlotte Langley and 14 other chefs that happen to be female here tonight. 8 entrepreneurs that also happen to be female in service out front. And why we keep saying that is You don't say female lawyer, you don't say female CEO unless you're an asshole. Two fantastic DJs, your boy Brian and the incredible Scratch Bastard. So it's a family affair, and we're here organizing people around critical food need and food insecurity in Toronto and in Vancouver to try and help out our community. And so far, so amazing. On top of that, we're raising critical funds for organizations that service women who are facing street entrenchment, homelessness, mental illness. And in Toronto, that organization is Sistering. To date, we've put out almost 2 million meals in Vancouver. Sistering does about 500 a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner and snacks for folks. So by these almost 300 people joining us over 2 days and 4 dinners, we're able to support a bunch of women there for 3 straight months, and we're stoked about it.
Folks get brown. Folks get brown in the sunshine. Yeah.
So you get the idea. That's the dinner series we do. We bring everybody's genius in, all the cooks, all the people, and then we talk about it. And so we're going to do this all across America. And when Eamon had the idea, we were like, this is going to cost a lot of money. And Domo, without even blinking, jumped in and said, we're in. And so they backed us. They don't just talk about it, and they don't just work on stuff with us. They're really a true partner. Wherever you're from in America, I'm hoping we're going to see you there. So I'm going to grab somebody from the audience, somebody unsuspecting. How about you? Want to jump up and talk to me for a second, Annie? That's what happens when you sit in the front row. Look at all these folks 8 rows back. They're like, I'm not sitting up next to this crazy asshole. I don't know what's going to happen. Okay, so I'm going to say something to you, and you're going to say it back to me, and then I'm going to pass the mic to Eamon. You ready? Okay. All right. I promise to leave the world a better place than I found it. Y'all believe her? All right. You can sit down. Now, everybody stand up and turn to somebody you don't know, and you're going to do the exact same thing. Okay, it took me 5 seconds. Grab a seat. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate your attention.